From the nation's capital, Eye on Washington with Marilee Joyce. A weekly discussion about the federal issues most important to Nevada. And now, from Washington, D.C., here's Marilee Joyce.
Well, good day to you. I'm Marilee Joyce, and this is Eye on Washington, the only statewide Nevada news program produced in Washington, D.C. Every week, Eye on Washington takes you to Capitol Hill for a discussion with Nevada's delegation and other leaders about the federal matters that matter to you. Today's topic, he wants to help provide a truly skilled local workforce. We'll tell you about one Nevada U.S. Congressman's plan for creating a job training system that aims to give workers the skills they need to compete. And he is my guest today, of course, Nevada U.S. Congressman Joe Heck. Thanks for being here again.
Thank you.
Well, it's the employer-employee version of square peg, round hole. We have folks out of work, we have folks looking to hire, but in too many cases, the unemployed person doesn't have the skill needed for the position. And today on Eye on Washington, we'll tell you why so many job openings today are going unfilled. We'll find out what my guest says needs to happen for you out-of-work Nevadans to be able to compete in today's economy. In late January, President Obama's State of the Union address included unemployment-related comments that some might have seen as ironic. He said, despite high unemployment scores of jobs go unfilled, and these are good paying jobs in the manufacturing and high-tech areas, for example. Well, my guest, the congressman, says that for him, there's no mystery there. In fact, last December, he introduced a bill aimed at making sure those jobs can be filled. The problem, he says, is that the federal government currently administers at least 47 separate job training and employment programs, representing an annual taxpayer investment of $18 billion. And meanwhile, local workforce investment boards responsible for policy and oversight of area training and employment services are mired in federal bureaucracy. That means they have difficulty responding to the changing needs of area employers. He says his Local Job Opportunities and Business Success, or Local Jobs Act, would help ensure that workforce investment boards are reflective of the local needs of communities and thus able to help make sure workers get training for jobs actually in demand. And we'll look at the details in a bit. But you know, a little bit of background: the State of the Union comments on jobs going unfilled because they can't find people to with the training for them. That was old news for you. You've been working on streamlining the folks responsible for matching training with local needs for some time, haven't you?
Yes, I've been very involved with the local workforce investment board, and especially in the healthcare sector, which is my background. And taking some of that experience, now trying to parlay it into something that will work across the spectrum of jobs that we may have available in Southern Nevada, and try to get the folks that are currently out of work trained into a position that they can easily fill and get back to work. Well,
check out these stats. You know, in late January of this year, the Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce, I have a quote here, they reported 13.2 million Americans are out of work. Another 10 million have taken part-time jobs or have otherwise given up looking for full-time work. Yet, it says, of the 3.2 million jobs that are currently open, an estimated 10 to 30% go unfilled because people don't have skills for them. Is that your experience when you meet with Nevada employers, for instance?
It is to a certain degree. Now, again, in Southern Nevada, we have a rather unique workforce need in the service and hospitality sector, but there are other jobs available, and we're finding difficulty, or the employers are finding difficulty getting applicants that meet their needs to be able to fill that job.
And 10 to 30% is a lot.
It sure is when you have the highest unemployment rate in the nation like we do.
The head of that Georgetown Center, Tony Carnavale, is quoted in USA Today as saying that the mismatch between what workers can do and what skills employers need, already was there and got worse in the recession. What's the situation in Nevada? I don't know if you can speak for Northern Nevada, but
well, certainly, we've seen a big problem with the loss of construction jobs in Nevada. In fact, we know that probably close to 70,000 construction jobs were lost. And now we know that many of those jobs just unfortunately will not be coming back. We will never see that level of construction like we've seen in the previous decade. And so the question is, what are we going to do for those individuals who used to work in construction? That job may not come back. We got to prepare them for the job that will be there, the jobs of the future. And that's what we're looking at through the Education and Workforce Committee with the Workforce Investment Act reauthorization, of which my Local Jobs Act is one piece.
You've been on the show before talking about the need to clean up redundancy and bureaucratic red tape, and this is a great example. We've got $18 billion going toward 47 separate job training and employment programs, and you've been here before just beating your head with the redundancy on the Hill, haven't you?
Well, it is. It's a difficult problem because, as I found, there may be a program that's already been authorized and funded, and then several years later, another congressperson may think, oh, well, we need a program to do X. And it winds up being the same thing that's already been put into place. And then there's another set of rules to accomplish the same goal. And that's when you find the disconnect in what happens between the laws. And so we looked at the job training programs comprehensively, and we want to minimize duplication, put our restricted resources in the place where they can do the most good for folks back home.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to detail his bill, tell how it would help Nevada. That's right after this.
You're watching Eye on Washington with Marilee Joyce. Brought to you by the National Mining Association, Caesars Entertainment, the Frias Companies, NV Energy, the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, the Nevada Mining Association, Western Lithium Corporation, and Skyline Restaurant and Casino.
America's minerals have made us a nation of self-reliant dreamers, shaping our world and the endless ways we enjoy it. But red tape often forces us to import more than half the minerals we depend on. Minerals we already have. We don't import our dreams. Shouldn't that go for our minerals too? The National Mining Association. Learn more at nma.org.
You already watch Eye on Washington with Marilee Joyce, Nevada's only statewide program produced in Washington, D.C. But for even more news from Capitol Hill that affects you, your family, and your business, you need to read Nevada's Washington Watch, our online newsletter. In-depth reporting on federal efforts that impact you. Our exclusive Inside the Beltway column, putting a microscope on Nevada's congressional delegation. Guest editorials about what Nevada needs from the Hill. Nevada's Washington Watch, your watch on Washington. Subscribe today at nevadaswashingtonwatch.com.
Heads we go, tails we stay. A coin flip. That's how it all began for what is now Nevada's largest transportation provider. Charlie Frias, with a can-do spirit and support of his loving wife Phyllis, bought ABC Union Cab in 1966. They then parlayed 5 cabs into a fleet of nearly 1,000. And today, Frias has over 2,000 employees and was recently voted Las Vegas's best company to work for. Frias, safe, reliable, simply the best.
Hey, it's embarrassing to be tackled by someone smaller than me. I look weak and effeminate, so now I'm overcompensating.
I'd also be very ashamed by that. I'm not waiting until it happens to me to make you feel small.
My dad taught me to be the alpha male, so now I'm gonna knock a tray out of your hands at lunch.
Kids bully for all kinds of reasons. None of them are good. Know your kids' friends and monitor their social networking. Find more tips at flipthescriptnow.org.
And welcome back to Eye on Washington, our discussion of how to help our job seekers compete in today's local workforce. My guest today is Nevada U.S. Congressman Joe Heck. Washington's one-size-fits-all approach to workforce training has failed our families and our communities. Well, that's what my guest, the congressman, told the press last December when he introduced a bill that seeks to create an employer-driven job training system. We mentioned in our last segment there are 47 separate job training and employment programs costing taxpayers $18 billion a year. Now, Congressman Heck says he has a plan both to reduce the redundancy inherent here and to better determine what skills are needed in a particular community. His Local Job Opportunities and Business Success, or Local Job Act, would reform the current workforce investment system. Local workforce investment boards are responsible for policy and oversight of area training and employment services. But the congressman says they don't adequately represent the changing needs of local employers. His Local Jobs Act would ensure that 2/3 of America's job creators in our workforce investment board system are employers, and it would expand the board's function to provide more engagement with employers in the local area. The bill expands decision-making at the local level. It eliminates eliminates more than 20 federal mandates regarding board representation, and it encourages more job training to meet in-demand job opportunities. And your focus here is that the feds don't know what's needed on the state level when it comes to state skills or skills needed on the local business and in local on the local level in local businesses, and also in unique industries in each state. Correct?
Correct, and so especially for a place like Southern Nevada, where we have some unique industries in the gaming industry, back here in Washington, people inside the Beltway may not understand the types of jobs necessary, especially with the growing IT perspective in gaming. And so what the bill does is says, look, right now states, taxpayers send money to Washington, we take our cut, then we send it back with a bunch of strings attached. And what we're trying to do is cut those strings and give the states, the local workforce investment boards, more flexibility in determining the jobs that they have available within their community, and more importantly, what the training needs are to get people capable of filling those jobs.
And we need to emphasize again, the elimination of those federal mandates would mean that that local officials would determine the remaining board members. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. And so instead of Washington saying, this is who needs to be on your board, we give the local workforce investment board the flexibility to put people on their board that represent the jobs, industries, and businesses that are in their community. And it also tightens the relationship with training programs, vocational training programs, as well as community colleges, because they're going to be the ones responsible for developing the training that these workers are going to need.
You've also said that boards would have to spend a portion of resources directly on training that meets the changing workforce needs of area businesses.
Right. We don't want to give money to the board and have it go to the bureaucracy. We've got to get the money out to help those who need the training to take the jobs. And that's why we held a field hearing in Las Vegas last summer on this very issue. And so we heard from some of the training academies, we heard from the community college system about the issues that they're facing and the obstacles they have in trying to get the dollars necessary to train people for the jobs that currently exist.
Let's make sure this is clear to my audience. I mentioned this in the intro, but I want to let you explain it better than I did, I'm sure. What is the purpose of a workforce, quote, investment board, and who serves on those boards currently?
Well, the current board is made up of local elected officials and some representatives of business and industry. And their job is to kind of set the priority of what types of job training programs should be taking place in their local community. But what we have found is that disconnect, because there's a disproportionate amount of people that aren't in the job sector with what we need to do. Now, our local workforce investment board had a great program in helping to train nurses and did a great job through a cooperative effort with the Southern Nevada Medical Industry Coalition. And that's the type of relationships that we want to foster. Things that are low cost, very effective, and get people back to work.
But you want to, overall, for your legislation, the important thing is putting local employers on there as well, correct?
Right, and that's how the program in Las Vegas that I just mentioned was so successful. Utilizing the Southern Nevada Medical Industry Coalition, which is made up of healthcare professionals, they were able to put together a program that quickly trained nurses to get to work. And so we need to use that as a best practice and expand it across this nation and use it in other sectors in Southern Nevada.
When did you start seeing a big enough mismatch between that kind of square peg round hole thing I mentioned, jobs open and people not trained for them? When were you alarmed enough to do a bill?
Well, we learned about it as we did this field hearing last summer, and so that's what sparked my interest in looking at what the issues were specifically in Southern Nevada and how we could better address them, and I believe the Local Jobs Act takes care of that.
You know, a point in your legislation I didn't get to is it's encouraging of the local workforce investment boards to partner, as you started mentioning, with higher education institutions and economic development organizations to address area businesses' workforce needs. Expand on that just a little more.
Well, it's more important to figure out, once you figure out what the local job market is based on the input of the employers, now how are you going to train those individuals to fill that job need? And so you should have the community colleges and training academies involved at the grassroots levels. They should be involved in the discussion so they can very quickly and very capably adapt their curriculum to meet the needs of the local workforce.
Okay, when Ian Washington returns, we're going to tell you about a couple other pieces of legislation from the Congressman's Committee and how they complement his bill, and again, how it's going to help you in Nevada. Stay with us.
Every day, thousands of people in northern Nevada don't get enough to eat. 1 out of 5 children in northern Nevada go to bed hungry every night. But you can do something about it. Catholic Community Services of Northern Nevada has been providing help and creating hope in our community for more than 65 years. By donating food, time, or money, you can make a difference in a hungry person's life. When you make your generous donation to St. Vincent's Dining Room and St. Vincent's Food Pantry, you're helping to fight the scourge of hunger in northern Nevada. In these tough economic times, now more than ever, we need to help those less fortunate. To find out how you can donate to St. Vincent's Dining Room and St. Vincent's Food Pantry, call, click, or stop by, and together we can end hunger in northern Nevada.
Thanks to an ongoing commitment by America's mining companies, more than 2 million acres already have been reclaimed. To learn more about reclamation or other aspects of mining, visit nma.org, the National Mining Association.
You already watch Eye on Washington with Marilee Joyce, Nevada's only statewide program produced in Washington, D.C. But for even more news from Capitol Hill that affects you, your family, and your business, you need to read Nevada's Washington Watch, our online newsletter. In-depth reporting on federal efforts that impact you. Our exclusive Inside the Beltway column, putting a microscope on Nevada's congressional delegation. Guest editorials about what Nevada needs from the Hill. Nevada's Washington Watch, your watch on Washington. Subscribe today at nevadaswashingtonwatch.com.
Heads we go, tails we stay. A coin flip. That's how it all began for what is now Nevada's largest transportation provider. Charlie Frias, with a can-do spirit and support of his loving wife Phyllis, bought ABC Union Cab in 1966. They then parlayed 5 cabs into a fleet of nearly 1,000. And today, Frias has over 2,000 employees and was recently voted Las Vegas's best company to work for. Frias, safe, reliable, simply the best.
How will new energy technology make our lives better? Will geothermal, wind, and solar energy be a bigger part of our future? Yes. And soon it will all be in our backyard. Learn more at nvenergy.com.
And welcome back to Eye on Washington, our discussion of one Nevada U.S. Congressman's ideas on how to make sure those seeking jobs can compete in today's workforce and can do the jobs that are available. We've been visiting with him, of course, Nevada U.S. Congressman Joe Heck. Well, I mentioned in our first segment that the Congressman's Local Jobs Act actually joins 2 other proposals aimed at reforming the nation's workforce investment system. Let's look at those other bills now and then let my guest tell us what each means to out-of-work Nevadans. Congressman Heck serves on the House Committee on Education and the Workforce, from which all 3 bills originated. My guest says the members sought to reduce waste, improve accountability, and ensure services are meeting the needs of today's workers and employers. As we've shared, his Local Jobs Act would put more employers on workforce investment boards and thereby help ensure workers receive training for in-demand jobs. A second effort from the committee is the Workforce Investment Improvement Act. It aims to increase flexibility in services offered to job seekers. It eliminates arbitrary barriers that prevent workers from assessing training immediately as skills are needed. And the third piece of legislation is the Streamlining Workforce Development Programs Act. That bill consolidates 33 of those 47 job training programs I told you about earlier. The goal is to make the programs more responsive and accountable to taxpayers, while also helping bring about a more outcome-driven job training program. And Congressman, your committee chairman, John Klein, he told the press last December that you've all been working on this since the start of the 112th Congress to figure out how best to strengthen the nation's training program, job training program. And the chairman said, quote, "We cannot allow a burdensome bureaucracy to undermine support for workers, frustrate employers, and waste taxpayer resources." And those 3 proposals seem to represent what he said and what you've learned.
Well, certainly, and you can see that the common theme across all 3 proposals is to try to get the federal government out of the way, return resources to the states, and empower the states and the local investment boards to do what they need to do to meet the local needs that they see. Obviously, the job sector in Las Vegas is going to be very different than the job sector in Kansas City, in New York City, or in Anchorage, Alaska. And so to have this one-size-fits-all approach really doesn't do justice for the local workforce needs. And so that's the common theme that we're trying to bring across all three bills.
You know, all three bills seek to improve job training. And while your Nevada constituents are applying for badly needed jobs, you're trying to make sure they have the skills they need to get hired. That's obviously the theme of this show. But I wonder, do you have any examples of specific needs cited by some hiring Nevada companies?
Well, we certainly have seen, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, in the information technology sector. It's a very rapidly growing industry in Southern Nevada. And so we need folks that are hopefully local and better trained to fill that IT sector. And as we move forward with things like online gaming, which will bring many jobs to Southern Nevada in the IT sector, we want to make sure that as that legislation moves forward, we have a ready, capable, and competent workforce to take those jobs as they grow in Southern Nevada. And
in a shaky Nevada economy, would you say this workforce training, the redundancy and the problems associated with it, would you say it's specifically preventing Nevadas and others from getting the work that they need?
Well, I think there's a large delay. There's a lag time between an identified need and when you finally get a curriculum established to train the person to fill that need. And so what we want to be is more proactive. Hence the reason for having those employers on the workforce board to say, this is what we envision needing over a certain period of time. We'll have the training academies and the community colleges present to say we can ramp up and fill that need, marry those two things together so that when the job becomes available, we have somebody ready to take it.
You know, again, the other half of your committee, it's workforce and education, and it's kind of a perfect marriage when you consider that you're trying to get together with institutions of higher education and community colleges as part of this. How is that being discussed on the committee?
Well, we actually want to bring it down even further into the K-12 system. I mean, we need to start prepping students when they're in their high school years, and that's why there's also an emphasis this year in the Educational Workforce Committee on CTE education, career and technical education, making sure that folks that may not be going on to a post-secondary college education have a useful skill once they graduate high school. And so we're incorporating those perspectives as well across all three bills.
So far, I know it's a little early, but so far, what's the support for your Local Jobs Act and the other two bills that we've mentioned?
Well, we're building support. The Local Jobs Act, my bill, is probably the most bipartisan of the bills because it sets a new framework. It changes the policy and the governance of the workforce investment boards that empowers them. And we're moving forward, building support on the other two components as well. We hope to go to markup later this year.
Do you find agreement among not just your colleagues on the committee, but your friends in Congress in general about one of your big things is really the redundancy and all this bureaucracy. Do you find a lot of agreement that a lot of programs, and when you have 47 separate job things or separate programs doing the same thing, do you get some surprise? Do you get support? What's the reaction?
We have, especially in education and workforce, we have received a lot of support, bipartisan support. One of the first bills that passed from the education side was reducing a lot of duplication in the Department of Education, and many of the recommendations came from the Department of Education and the President. So we were able to build those bonds saying, look, it's not a matter of cutting funding. We just want the funding to go to a good purpose and not to fund a bureaucracy.
Okay, we're going to be right back with our mailbag segment. It's right after this.
All of us at Caesars Entertainment have something we want to say.
Play responsibly.
Play responsibly. We don't want you to gamble if you've had too much to drink.
You shouldn't gamble if you're lonely or depressed.
And if you're under 21, you're not allowed to play.
No, no, no.
No matter which of our casinos you come to, our message is always the same.
Play responsibly.
Play responsibly.
Play responsibly. We know you're coming to our casinos to have a good time, and we always want you to leave feeling like you did.
America's minerals have made us a nation of self-reliant dreamers, shaping our world and the endless ways we enjoy it. But red tape often forces us to import more than half the minerals we depend on. Minerals we already have. We don't import our dreams. Shouldn't that go for our minerals too? The National Mining Association. Learn more at nma.org.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds.
Built on a fleet of just 5 cabs bought in 1966 by founder Charlie Frias, Frias Transportation is now Nevada's largest transportation provider. Today, Frias has a fleet of nearly 1,000 vehicles and more than 2,000 employees. As an industry and community leader, Frias continues to create the future of transportation technology and management and actively supports the community, continuing the legacy of quality service in the Las Vegas Valley. Simply the best. Thanks to an ongoing commitment by America's mining companies, more than 2 million acres already have been reclaimed. To learn more about reclamation or other aspects of mining, visit nma.org, the National Mining Association.
And we are back with our closing segment of Eye on Washington. It's our mailbag segment, and in this segment we tell you about an issue that the Congressional Mailbag page of the Joyce Communications website has been getting a lot of correspondence about. We read one of your letters on the air, and we invite our guests to respond to you right here. And Congressman, I know it's a shock, but your office has been hearing a lot about spending. And I have a letter here for you from Matthew S. of Moapa Valley. He writes, "Dear Congressman Heck, I'd heard that the House reduced discretionary spending over the last 2 years for the first time since World War II. What things are included in discretionary spending, and how are decisions made on what amounts are allowed?"
That's a really great question. First, I'm glad that he got the message that we did cut discretionary spending over the last 2 years for the first time since World War II. Discretionary spending makes up everything that really funds the federal government, all the cabinet level agencies. And so that's where discretionary spending is. And we divide out non-security, non-defense discretionary spending, those things that go to Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense, and then the rest of discretionary spending, which funds the remainder of government. The decisions are made based at doing a review of the programs within each cabinet level agency and trying to look at what's succeeding, what's not working, what's been authorized but not funded, and then coming up with where we need to put that money to accomplish the stated purposes of each of the agencies. Remember that 60% of the budget is mandatory spending, and those are the things like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and interest on our debt. That's a whole separate process, but right now we've been able to cut discretionary spending the last 2 years in a row.
Good tutorial for Matthew. Thank you very much, and thanks for being here today.
Good to be with you again.
Look forward to seeing you soon. That is it for this week's Eye on Washington. Be sure to join us next time as we discuss more important federal matters and their impact on you in Nevada. And visit joycecommunications.com or our Facebook page for more of the very latest from the Hill that impacts your life. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Marilee Joyce in Washington. Good day.